Welcome to Disrupt You. This is the show where we'll hear what changes are headed to colleges and universities in all departments. We'll learn what innovation really means in higher education.
Welcome to Disrupt You. Who is ready for this week? Are you ready, Dustin?
Hey, this is actually not Dustin. This is the president of CBS. Did you watch by chance? Did you watch the Emmys this past week?
I did.
You did watch the Emmys?
Yeah, I watched the highlights.
You were one of the 10 people who watched the Emmys, and if you watched, you would know that the person who won lead actress was Jean Smart of Hacks on HBO. Lead actor was Jason Sudeikis off of Ted Lasso, Apple TV. Other winners were Netflix, Apple TV, and Netflix specifically. Guess who are not the winners? Shows on CBS.
Any of them. None of them. Unless it's a show that Netflix picked up later.
Absolutely.
And did better, right?
So it was almost like watching a retirement show of CBS. It was kind of painful to watch, of thinking about when our show is about innovation, looking about innovation of the future of all these industries. And it was like watching a retirement episode. I didn't actually watch it, but if I were to watch it, it was the retirement episode of CBS and where the future of entertainment is going.
Well, You remember what I said. Netflix did not kill Blockbuster. Blockbuster killed Blockbuster. So let's not blame this on Netflix. Let's blame this on CBS for not thinking forward. Okay.
I love it. I hear we've got a special guest today that is focused on innovation and disruption.
We do. Let me give you a couple things about our guests. So our guest today is a higher education industry veteran with more than 30 years experience at numerous institutions. He's served as a faculty member, a department chair, a director of international programs, vice president for academic affairs, provost, and president. And my personal favorite, if you don't know, he's ran an orientation before, okay? He's the president and co-author of multiple books, the most recent being Pivot, A Vision for New University. He has served as the president of Maryville since 2007. And in that time, we've achieved unprecedented growth and we've earned national distinction for leading an innovative revolution in higher ed. So without further ado, welcome. Welcome, Dr. Lombardi.
How are you all doing? Hey, thanks for having me. This is fun.
Yeah.
This is really the episode where Erin and I are going to try not to get fired. So if you're listening to this podcast right now, but hey, we're not going to go easy on you. We got some tough questions. We're going to make you think in these. These aren't all softballs. So Erin, what are you thinking first?
Well, I want to start off with a book I read about a year, maybe a year and a half ago, Relentless. And I learned after reading it that you are a big fan of this book too. And it's a book that I read quite a bit, but it has stuck with me. It's like it's one of those books that keeps coming up. And I want to know how you resonated with it. And do you feel like you're a relentless leader? And how did that come to be?
I would think that probably everybody who's worked with me closely would say I'm relentless, and then after that there'd be some expletive like asshole or something of that nature. Relentless resonated with me. The other book that I'm huge on in the same genre, if you will, is the book Grit, and the idea of there's something called grit out there that really distinguishes people in terms of their approach to success and approach to achievement, and Relentless is a part of that, I think. So yeah, I think being relentless for the right reasons or the right cause, and in the case of Maryville, and for me, it's about access and opportunity and opening up the doors of education to millions of people who've been closed out of it because of racial bias and gender bias and all those things. Although on that I'm relentless about, and to me, there isn't a process or a system or a culture that should in any way stand in the way of that goal, which is access and opportunity. So yeah, relentless is a good way to describe, I think, at least my approach, both personally and professionally.
One thing I hear you say about, access to education that I've been really big into recently is, so first, I hate the rankings. College rankings have there's terrible pieces behind that. But here's one thing that caught my eye this past week. Forbes, they have a ranking of colleges. They're not one of the biggest ones, but they're one of them. But they started increase. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and Erin, your thoughts about this, that they started their data set for the rankings was what percent of your students are Pell Grant students. And I love that. I was a Pell Grant student. I wouldn't have been able to go to college without a Pell Grant. So they started including that. How many of your students are Pell Grant? What are your thoughts about? What other data points or of access can we talk about?
Well, the ranking system, whether it's U.S. News or whatever, that is the most elitist set of rankings that you can have, because they give the bulk of the points in that system to two things: your reputation among your peers, which, let's face it, that's like asking college coaches to rank their own football team. It's preposterous. The other part of it is it's based on selectivity. Mm-hmm. How many students don't you let in? Now think about that. We're going to argue that the best restaurant in town is the one that won't let most people in. We're going to argue that the best hospital is the one that doesn't let people in. We're going to add, I mean, it's so anti-democratic and elitist and exclusionary, particularly for underrepresented groups and others, that it's ridiculous. At one point a few years ago, we in the senior leadership team at Maryville, we went around the room and we talked openly about what our SAT scores were and what our GPA was in high school. What we found is half of us couldn't get admitted to Maryville, or certainly couldn't get admitted to any of these schools that claim to be elite, like Ivy League, and yet we're running the second fastest growing university in the United States. So what does that tell you? It tells you that all the things that higher ed culture for the last 100 years has based rankings and reputation on is bull. It's bull crap. It doesn't say anything about, again, the grit and passion of the individual learner, the quality of the education that's presented, or the outcomes that are achieved. You know, like at Maryville, we got 98% career placement rate for our graduates, which is, tremendous. Doesn't say anything about that. It talks about how hard it is to get in. It's I grew up a working class kid in Rhode Island, and I in the summer I would wait on the tables of people who were supposedly Ivy Leaguers, and I can tell you right now, I wasn't impressed then, and I'm not impressed now.
I like that.
As you were talking, I was just thinking like, oh, if we could get like a really good grit assessment, that would be how we should accept people into college, right? Like, how much grit do you have, or how much potential for building resiliency do you have? Because that's what you need.
And the irony of that, Erin, is that I hope we come up with a grit assessment prior, but usually grit can be assessed only when you put people into a situation. It's kind of like in the military, which is probably the best example. You can train soldiers all day and all night, but until somebody starts shooting bullets over at them, you don't know which ones really have the grit. The same is true with education. A quick story. I started the PhD program at Ohio State many moons ago, 1981 actually, and there were 49 of us, and only 3 of us finished. I can guarantee you the 3 people that finished were not the smartest people in that cohort at all. We were just the ones that got to a certain point where we said, you know what, damn it, I put all this work in, I'm going to finish this thing. Yep. And I think that is a very, very key element. And I think we will come up with a way of kind of getting at that.
I've messed up.
And you know what, quite frankly, being Pell eligible is probably a sign of grit. Like if you are Pell eligible, you've been through something. Like you are making it here, you're applying for college, that means you probably do have grit. So it's probably a much better indicator of being Pell eligible than your ACT score.
Right. Absolutely.
Probably is.
So I'm hearing the passion for grit and that kind of hustle drive of being the person who puts in the work. So, Mark, one of our most popular episodes this season of Disrupt You was an episode called What Grinds My Gears. Basically, what we did is Erin and I went back and forth. We had a list and we didn't talk about it beforehand. And we had these things that grinds our gears about higher education. And it blew up. It was one of the most popular among our listeners, and our listeners were tweeting and commenting and giving their takes and whatnot. So I want to ask you, okay, so what is one thing that grinds your gears about higher ed in general, in the industry where we are today, something that you say, man, why are we still doing this? Or why is this a conversation in higher education?
Well, there are so many things that grind my gears in higher ed that I could probably talk for hours, but I'll pick one for you and we can talk about it. Here's what it is. Dustin, what are you an expert in? A content expert in what? Tell me.
I'd say branding, interpersonal and corporate branding.
Okay, great. And you're not an expert in judging 17-year-olds as to what their potential is in life, right?
Absolutely not.
Okay, and no faculty member is, not me when I was a faculty member, not you, not anybody. Yet, what does higher ed do? And this goes back to the admissions and the elitism. We take a bunch of 16, 17, 18-year-olds and we sort of figuratively put our hand on their forehead and say, yes, you're worthy of at higher ed, or no, you're not worthy. You know what? No one can do that. No one has ever been able to do it. The reality is our job is to give people an opportunity, and they will achieve, they will sink, or they will swim during that process. But it's the opportunity that matters. And so what grinds my gears is the idea that we can sort of say, well, you had a 3.2 in high school, but Erin had a 3.4. Therefore, we're going to admit Erin, and we're not going to admit you, Dustin, based on ridiculousness, based on craziness, right? I mean, so what grinds my gears is this notion of elitism and exclusion, and that people who are excellent content experts in their field and teachers like yourself and many others also have decided along the way at some point, or many of them have, they can also judge high school students and what their potential is for success. You know, when I was in high school, I would probably be voted most likely to go to prison, right? Not to be the president of the university. When I go back home to Rhode Island and I bump into old high school friends and they ask me what I'm doing, I tell them the look of shock is significant. No one can predict how people are going to do. Our job is to give them the opportunity and the tools to succeed, not to judge whether they can succeed or not.
Absolutely. And I think you even look at that opportunity where you make the education accessible. And then once you are here, you make that inclusive. In a sense, I know Maryville was very early on that we were very fortunate during COVID of the online classes, online courses and programs where it was easier pivot there. But even having that education, it's inclusive, where I say, okay, I'm watching over my brothers and sisters and my single mom, and I'm working, she's working. That was my growing up. I was, raised by a single mother, and we both had to work. We both paid rent growing up, and I could be flexible, where when I went to college, I couldn't do that. Right. And I had issues in certain classes because I had to miss them because I had to pay for things. But I think once they're here, what can we do, whether that be online courses, virtual courses, on-ground courses, these options moving forward? I think the options moving forward, doesn't get talked about much as far as making it inclusive and learning environment.
That's right. And we live in a world of multiple platforms. Like Maryville's fortunate, we built excellent multiple platforms, virtual, online, on ground, et cetera, et cetera. We have to use all of them because every student's different, personalized. And again, you're so right about inclusion and DEI issues in general. Education has to open up the doors of opportunity, not shut them. And you do that in a variety of ways, including utilizing all the tools at our disposal, like the tools we're utilizing today. And that opens up opportunities for people. It opens up and it allows talent that's out there to breathe. Right. It allows that talent to find its voice, and it allows it to discover and explore and succeed. And, if education is not committed to educating the largest number of people, then I'll tell you right now, it's not worth a damn.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
And your metaphor of sink or swim, I think, and what Dustin was talking about too, the lifeboats can't look the same for everyone, right? Like we have to offer lifeboats. We've got to throw out preservers. Like some people might need a life jacket. Other people can swim stronger. We've got to have this adaptive learning and adaptive support, and we have to, and that builds inclusion. Right. And so, we do. And the tools are at our disposal. And at Maryville, we're using them with learning diagnostics or whatever. And with we're investing and putting a lot, as you know, into AI. And AI ultimately is going to be the engine that drives adaptive learning, because students and everybody will be able to, in real time,
understand not just what they're learning, but how they're learning and the best ways to learn. And it can adapt and move with the student throughout their entire experience, or the learner. I mean, the power of it is amazing. And by the way, it's going to end up being the greatest force for democratization and the greatest force for inclusion and equality in this century, assuming it's used properly. And not used to just gin up a crowd, as we've seen, or to tear down, but to build up. And so that's why I find the use of all those tools, and I know many of our faculty are using them currently, the sky's the limit, really.
Mm-hmm.
That's what
Dustin and I talked about. Go ahead.
Just one thing I'm passionate about. I love the higher ed field is speaking specifically to like underrepresented groups where. And I heard this from a student once. This is not even my word. I heard this from a student once that we were talking about these careers and career opportunities and whatnot. And they said, you don't know the opportunities until you know the opportunities. Right. And I still sticks with me today, where you say, I don't even know what I could do right outside, because I'm used to, because when I grew up, I didn't really leave my block really for the most part, like the block that I grew up on, I never really left that. So I didn't know what those things are. I think higher ed can do that.
Think about this. This decade, the 7 of the 10 fastest growing careers this decade haven't been invented yet. Mm-hmm. So you've got a whole generation of young people right now, for example, and others, who are going to have opportunities to move into careers they don't even know existed or exist. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, no, cybersecurity wasn't on anybody's radar. Now cybersecurity is a fact of life for everyone, both securing their own data and personal and whatever, and the fact that we're gonna need hired professionals to help us with that. I mean, the limitless opportunities from an education / career standpoint are there. And what universities have to do, frankly, is get out of their own way, be nimble, be agile, quickly respond, develop, and make the process of education a living, breathing, organic thing, and not a static exercise, which frankly, I was educated in the 20th century, and it was an incredibly staid and static kind of process. I had some really good teachers, and they were very knowledgeable about content, but the process of teaching and learning was very, very antiquated. And as I tell people here, you've heard it before. I mean, gang, the 20th century is over. We're now in the 21st century, and we need to look forward and not backward.
That's great. Erin, what do you think? What question do you have?
What's that?
Okay, so this kind of is related, but what is holding higher ed back from that innovation? What's holding us back as an industry, not Maryville specific, but as an industry, what's holding higher ed back?
Well, I think it's very simple. Higher ed is largely staffed and run by people who are educated in the 20th century, like myself. And therefore, we are impacted by the what I call the antiquated culture of higher ed in the 20th century, some of the things we mentioned before about elitism and all the rest. And we're limited by our notion of how things should be done or what the process should be, because that's the way the process was before. It's kind of and it's not an indictment, it's rather the world has changed and higher ed needs to change with it. That's what we're doing here at Maryville by restructuring ourselves and leading this revolution. And we've got to do it in a way that looks forward, not backward. And so, again, we don't give a damn about college rankings. Maryville's ranked well in US News. I don't care. I couldn't tell you where we're ranked because it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter all these things we used to look at as bellwethers. What matters is giving access and opportunity to students. What matters is helping them learn how they learn and the way they learn and that adaptive educational process. And then what are the outcome? What are they able to do when they leave and they go into the workforce and career choices? That's what matters. And so what's holding higher ed back is its own culture and its own traditions. And that's not, by the way, I'm not saying get rid of tenure, get rid of this, get rid. There's a lot of things about higher ed that are fine. They're not a problem. But it's this notion of the way I was educated is the way this 18-year-old should be educated today. That's preposterous. You know, when I was educated, we had payphones, right? And we didn't even have answering machines. I typed on a typewriter my papers it's ridiculous to say people should be educated today the way I was educated. There should be nothing other than content experts like that. There should be nothing today that resembles the way I learned.
Yeah. And I love that.
I had an aha a few months ago that I don't know that higher ed's changed enough since Harvard and William and Mary 100 and however many 200 years ago. You know, like we still have an expert at the front of the room talking to students. We're doing that in different ways on Zoom and online, and there are flipped classrooms and there are things like that. But I am wholeheartedly agree that AI and adaptive learning, that is going to take us into a new version of learning that we haven't seen yet, and that I think is truly inclusive of all. I mean, we can't believe that the way we taught very elite white men 200 years ago is exactly the same way we should be doing it now. You know, we've changed things up some, but I do believe adaptive learning is our next phase, you know.
Couldn't agree more. And that's where we're headed. I mean, we're doing some amazing things right now. We're actually further ahead than people realize. And a lot of that will become clear over the next 12 to 18 months.
That's great. I got a question for both of you. How do you feel about this? This is kind of pitching idea on the fly. So most universities have something in the sense of like CTL or something where you're teaching educators that educators can to try new things and innovate their teaching and whatnot. What if we just say, okay, we're gonna say what it is, and we're gonna be a university that has a research and development department, right? Just like Microsoft has and Amazon, we're gonna have a research and development where we're gonna say 9 out of 10 of these crazy ideas are not gonna work. We're gonna have the space, we're gonna give that stuff, but we're gonna think like Amazon, we're gonna think like Microsoft, and literally call it research and development. Do you think that would work in higher ed? Do you think the culture is different where it wouldn't quite hit? What do you both think?
Well, I would argue we're already doing it, Dustin, with the DX group. I mean, we don't call it R&D. I suppose we could, but the reality is that if you don't have a group of innovative thought leaders ideating all the time within your organization, within your university, then you're already 2 strikes down before you even get up to bat. So the idea that you have that group of people, whoever they are, you nurture, you support. Yeah, there are going to be some crazy ideas. So what? I mean, you know, you think fast, you implement fast, you fail, you reward or support the failure, you learn from it, and you move forward. I mean, that's the model for the future. I don't think any business anywhere in the United States, and university, higher ed is a business. We take money from people and we pay people. So it's a business. Any of them can survive without an R&D ethos.
Absolutely. And but these crazy ideas, Erin can back me up on this. For the last 3 years, I've had I think a great idea, but I've been pitching a marijuana degree, the marijuana industry degree, just like there's the brewing majors. I don't know what you call it, cannabis business major for quite a few years. Erin has given me a hard time about
I
this.
volunteered to hold the clinicals for that.
Okay.
And I want to be part of the experiential aspect.
All right. See, we have a lab set up. Right. We got the space, Erin. Let's go.
I look in storage. I got a lava lamp somewhere and a old Jimi Hendrix poster. So I'm ready to go.
You'll see, Mark, that I'm on a week-by-week basis where Erin's going to just fire me from the show at any time. I feel like I'm on a thin rope.
I feel like you have to watch the YouTube version to see my eye rolls, because you're not getting that in the audio version, my constant eye rolling. So,
all right, I got a big question.
You're next.
I got a big question. Okay, we've done this before. We're going to get super tactical with you. This is the hard question now. This is going to make you a little uncomfortable. We play a game called Kill, date, marry. We try to make it a little PC, but the kill, date, marry is a game where we're going to give you 3 options. They're going to be innovation options, innovation tools, very tactical tools. And here's the rule. All of them are awesome. All 3 of them are fantastic. We want to test all of them, right? That's the correct, the PC term. But for the fun of the game, you got to marry one, as in you're all in. I'm all in. That's the future. You're going to date one, as in, I want to keep it around. I'm going to test it out. I want to test it. It may be a thing. It may not be a thing. And here's the hard part. You're going to have to kill one. I know you don't want to kill any of them, but you're going to have to kill one. And Erin, I want you to answer it. I'll try to answer it. I'll be devil's advocate of whoever we kill. I'll support them. So here are the 3. Here are the 3. And Erin, these are yours as well. We've got AI, everything that AI has. So machine learning, facial recognition, et cetera, AI. We've got AR and VR, so augmented reality, virtual reality. Put those together. That's your second option. And then blockchain is your third. So the use in higher education, those are the 3. What are you killing? What are you dating? And what are you marrying? What do you think?
Well, asking somebody who's been married and divorced twice this, I mean, is tricky, because my experience is date, marry, kill in that order.
In that order.
But that's a aside. Okay, here you go. Definitely marry AI. AI is the future of everything, healthcare, education, and on and on. The potential's limitless. We alluded to that. I think that's a slam dunk. Initially, I would instinctively say kill AR and VR, only because I think AR and VR are constantly evolving, particularly as we talk about the development of the metaverse and all of that implies. But then again, I can also see AR and VR, the next generation of AR and VR, being absolutely essential to the metaverse. So I'm kind of in between. I guess I'd say date AR and VR and kill blockchain, and not because I don't like I'm a big believer. Maryville is really the first blockchain university with everything we've done with blockchain. I'm not sure when I look over the horizon, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I'm not sure if AI and AR and VR are going to eclipse blockchain. Not because blockchain is bad or negative, but I see more potential in those areas than I do in blockchain. But so I would, that's probably the way I'd go, but I could probably be persuaded, not on the AI side. To me, AI is the future. It's the present. AI is the present. Let's face it. We've all interacted with AI already a dozen times today, and we'll be interacting with it a lot all the time. So that's probably where I'd fall.
All right, Erin, what are you thinking? Are you going to take the other side? I'm going to take it. I'm going to push back.
Mine are the same. When we prepped this, I already told you those were my way. Those were my picks too. Okay. But we chatted, and I'm much more about the AR than the VR. So if those were separated, it might be different. Or if it was just VR, I would have had to kill that, because I get nauseous. Like, I get motion sickness when I put those VR goggles on. But AR, I'm all in on. So I think I'm the same.
All right, let me stretch here, because Mark, you don't know this, but on the show, I just like to just pick at Erin. I always take the other side, and I just to make it interesting. So here we go. We're gonna go. Okay, AI, I get it. That's kind of easy. We're gonna marry that. I'm gonna date blockchain. I'm gonna tell you why. I'm gonna kill off AR, VR. I'm the same way. VR, I'm a little hesitant on. AR, I think, will kill off phones. I literally think these are done in the next few years. I don't think we'll hold these anymore. I think AR is going to take that over. But let me make a pitch. Okay, I'm going to try to win you guys over. Blockchain. If we look at changing up the entire academic timeline that you think of, as far as 4 years to get a bachelor's degree, you take this one class and then you take this one class. Let's get rid of that and say blockchain is going to allow you to own your education, own the learning objectives, which I'm going to tell you the truth. There's learning objectives on my syllabus. I don't know if any students look at the learning objectives. Let's make those learning objectives something that's employable, right? Something that I can sense that I give back to my community, to my family, to my career, and my paychecks. Let's base that on blockchain and say, hey, can you get a job after sophomore year? 100%. You could do that forever. But with blockchain, you get ownership. Is there an opportunity to kind of disrupt the timeline of education to say it's 4 years or 2 years for a master's? I know Maryville's interested in certificates and badging and whatnot. I think there's an opportunity there. Did I win either of you over? Are you saying, no, York, you are absolutely cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs?
I don't know. I mean, I don't disagree about the idea that students owning their own learning journey and their own outcomes is the way to go. But I don't know if blockchain is the vehicle for that, or if that vehicle is something else. And actually, Maryville, we are in deep in exploring that very issue, meaning that technology and development. So, and blockchain may indeed be that vehicle, or it may not be. That's the exciting and fascinating part of all of this to me, is that the explosion of new technologies is omnipresent, and it's great, but it's unclear, with a few exceptions, picking winners of the race, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Other than, I think, AI. I think if you asked 1,000 people, leaders in thought leaders, they'd all say AI is the future, to one degree or another. I mean, at least all the stuff I read. But what do you think, Erin?
Yeah, I agree. All three of these, I think, are critical tools right now. But I agree. I don't know where they're going, but I know AI is for sure. I think we're all on. Are you marrying AI, Dustin? You've got to be marrying AI, right?
Yeah,
we're all marrying AI, so we're on the same page with this. I think we're pretty close. Yeah.
Could either one of you see a day? I mean, this is no day here soon, but let's say like 10 years out. Could you see a classroom, right? A physical classroom where you're physically there, but there's like nothing in the room. It's all through glasses. It's all augmented reality, where you see the people around you for relationship building, but there's no TVs on the wall anymore. There's no whiteboards, like physical whiteboards. Could you ever see that day?
Yeah, I can. I mean, I think the idea of what I would call, and this is my own term, the idea that all kinds of technology are going to be embedded in us, embedded in the furniture we're on, or just like I can envision the day where you go into any space, virtually or not, and you sort of sit down, if you will, or you're touching some tabletop or whatever, it's collecting all kinds of data and readings on you, including medical and all kinds of other things. Yeah, I mean, I think those barriers, the barriers that we're talking about, where there are these clumsy devices that we move around with, are going to go away. Sure. The old idea of we're all going to have a chip in our head I think is certainly doable in this decade. The question, but the way some people react to vaccines, what are they going to react to about having a chip put in their head? I mean, hell, there'll be a revolt or something.
That's good. Well, moving forward, I like this next question from Erin. We're going to get to some budget, some wishful thinking here.
So we're going to give you $1 billion with a B, $1 billion to invest in anything higher ed. What are you going to spend the money on? And I have a real question. Are you going to fix higher ed, or are you just going to blow it up and start over with $1 billion? Where are we at?
Don't tempt me to blowing it up is way too tempting for a disruptive person like myself. But no, I think using AI for adaptive learning and opening up access and opportunity. Here's the way I view it. These technologies that we're talking about, and with the right attitudinal and cultural approach to them, which I think we have at Maryville with a lot of people, there's no reason why a school like Maryville can't be educating 1 million people at any given time. The scalability of these technologies is off the charts. And so, somebody like Dustin, for example, there's no reason why he can't be, in a very personalized way, educating 1,000 people a pop. It's not 1,000 people in an auditorium. When I started teaching at Ohio State, I'd have classes of 600-700 people in an auditorium. That's not what it is. That's not the choice. The real aspect of adaptive learning is having an educational experience that is individual and personalized, but it's scalable. And the extent to which, so I'd invest $1 billion in that, in a way to provide every student a personalized adaptive learning experience, no matter where they are, whether they're here on campus or whether they're in, Timbuktu somewhere, and doing it in a way that they own their own journey, right? They own that experience. They can buzz through certain things. Other things take longer. They've got it. And it's not an isolated experience. It doesn't have to be, I'm sitting alone in a dark room doing this. It can be a social, engaged experience on a host of levels. And again, $1 billion, or, well, doesn't take $1 billion. We're going to get there. We won't have $1 billion to do it, but we're investing in this kind of journey all the time. Sometimes in a given, it's sort of like in a given moment, it looks like a snapshot and it might not feel that way, but that's exactly the track we're on.
Yeah, I love that. It's like the Maryville knows what is needed on a 1 to 20 student ratio, how to support students, how to have that active learning, how to have that one-on-one personalized attention. And so it's how to use technology so that we can replicate that at a pace that can't be matched with humans, So not that humans aren't involved or humans aren't driving all of that technology, but I dream about an experience where we can educate 1 million people, but they still feel like they're in a class with 20 people. They still feel like their teacher knows their name, and they're still getting that customized and individualized feedback. I think that's got to be the goal.
Yeah, and it's not a dichotomy, right? It's a process. It's utilizing technology, for lack of a better term, to drive that into that reality. And I think that what futurists, the really interesting people that I know you and Dustin and I read, and what they understand is that what the technology we have today, like Dustin was saying, cell phones, whatever, this is not the end of the technological journey. It's just another step in the journey, right? And so, and all you have to do, I mean, I do this occasionally with, young people like my nieces or stepkids or whatever, is have them watch a movie from the 1990s or early 2000s when there were big clunky, telephones and flip phones and stuff like that. And they'll see that stuff and they'll bust out laughing. They're like, really? You carried that around? Because what they're carrying around now is light years ahead of that. Just like in 5 to 10 years, what we'll have will be light years ahead of what we have now. And if you embrace that journey of change, rapid change, right? Then if you embrace that, then you jettison all your notions of how we're going to scale up and educate thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. You jettison it and you go, well, we're going to do it. And a lot of how we're going to do it is going to be through AI and adaptive learning and all those kinds of things we've been talking about.
I know I've been doing a lot of reading about metaverse. And I said the other day to Dustin, I said, I feel like I'm in the 1960s reading about the internet. Like, this is like blowing my mind and I can't comprehend it, but you're right. You have to believe that it's coming, and we just have to be, I think, preparing ourselves to be ready for it, and how's education going to be ready for that?
Yeah. It really starts with, I don't know how you two feel about this, but it really starts with embracing the concept of rapid change. Some people are uncomfortable with change. Some people are comfortable, but they want the change to be incremental. You've got to embrace the concept of rapid change. And if you do that, then you start seeing the world and you see things differently. And you don't react negatively, but you sort of go, that's new, that's different, but here's the reality, right? And I'm old enough to say this, 40 or 50 years ago, change happened, real change happened over a matter of decades, right? Whether it's radio, TV, cable TV, and on, however you want to do. Now it happens in a matter of months. and it comes in waves, right? And a lot of people are uncomfortable with that. A lot of people my age are uncomfortable with it because they're not used to it. You have to get used to it. You have to embrace it. And you don't have to understand it all, although that's always a fun exercise, right? That's one of the purposes of education. But you have to embrace that it's the new reality. Yeah. And if you do that, then the sky's the limit too.
From a faculty standpoint, I definitely read the room, and I hear at Maryville, anywhere, every university I think faces is, faculty thinking, they're scared, right? This technology, will it take my job? Which I think every industry is wondering that question, right? In the future. And my philosophy and what I think is, no, we're going to scale the best faculty. You're going to do the exact same, the things that you're doing, you're going to keep doing it. It's just that I think a lot of faculty, what they do is, especially if depending on the major, but if you like an accounting professor, you could have made more money in accounting, but like you have a passion, like you want to teach, you want education. So you went into higher ed. And so you get a fulfillment of those 30 students or those 18 students in the classroom. What if we can spread that message? You are a fantastic communicator, active learning, you know your stuff. Let's say you're no longer bound by the students in St. Louis. Now that student in Cleveland, which maybe not to hate on Cleveland, I've never been to Cleveland, but maybe Cleveland doesn't have an amazing accounting professor. Now those students have that ability, right? There's a professor at Harvard, Anita Albers. She's amazing. I don't know her. I follow her on Instagram. I would love to take her class, right? But now the opportunities with technology, I could be in a class with Anita Albers. Is there an AI that I can feel a community base with the other students in my cohort or my groups in that class? I think it's just fascinating, the opportunity for scale.
Yeah, and think of it this way, for 150 years or more, or actually going back to Socrates, the educational process was like a Broadway show. There was a stage and there were stars on the stage, and then the rest of everybody else was an audience. And the job on stage was to entertain and enlighten the audience or what have you. Technology allows you to flip the script where the audience are the stars. Mm-hmm. And the people on stage are there to facilitate the enlightenment and entertainment of and whatever you want to call it, of the audience, not the other way around. And some faculty, are uncomfortable with that shifting dynamic, but I would argue they shouldn't be, because the goal of education is not to be a star. The goal of education is all those people out there get the benefit and go out in the world and do amazing things with what they've learned. And if you're comfortable in that facilitative role, and whatever the modality is, or whatever the scope or the scale, referencing your point, Dustin, about people around Cleveland, around the country, if you're comfortable with that, then the sky's the limit about what you can achieve, But if you're used to a model that is certainly 20th century, or actually it's a model pre-20th century that is being carried through, and you can't change from it, you're going to struggle. You're going to struggle in this environment, and you're not going to understand why you're struggling, right? It'd be like that series, The Chair, right? Yeah. Where some of the older faculty don't understand why nobody wants to take their course anymore, mm-hmm. And because the world's changed.
Mm-hmm. You'll like this.
And I would say it's might even be more important for a student to learn how to navigate situations or critically think or build grit or resiliency than even the skill they're learning. Not that the skill's not important now, but we know you're going to have to reskill the rest of your life. Change is happening so fast. The skills you learn, you're going to have to come back and reskill. Mm-hmm. We've got to be offering more than just skill and just here's the information you need today. It's here, I'm building these critical skills for you to be able to continue that learning for the rest of your life.
And what outcome do you achieve? Like, for example, if I had you over to the house for dinner and I love to cook and the food tasted great, you wouldn't say, well, what recipe is this and did you follow it? Did you follow the steps? You wouldn't give a damn how I cooked it if it tastes great, right? When you're at your favorite restaurant, you don't go in the kitchen to make sure the chef is doing it right. You only care what the outcome is. And if we focus in education on the outcome for the students, if that's what our focus is, what do we care that Erin, you're in class and you learn this way, and Dustin, you're in class and you learn this way, and I'm over here in the class learning this way. What do we care how we get there? And anybody that gives a damn how somebody gets there doesn't understand human beings and human nature. The reality is it doesn't matter it doesn't matter how fast you get there, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, somebody could take a course with Dustin and maybe buzz through the thing in 3 weeks, and somebody else it takes a longer. It doesn't really matter. What really matters is the outcome.
I love that.
Yeah. And really the only time it matters how you got there is when you did it wrong. So we can course correct, right? So it's like, right. How did you get to this? Let's move you over here. That's the only time it really matters, is so that you can figure out and break down, how do I do it better next time? However that is.
Exactly. But that's the part of failure that we instead of giving people an F because we should be instead rewarding the explication of the process, right? So they don't get to where they want to go. So we rebuild their thinking and their process, and we show, where maybe some of the missteps were or whatever the challenges were. That's the part of learning that can be absolutely empowering to a young person. Not, okay, you went through it, you got an F, boom, you're out. Frankly, that's a lousy way of approaching education. Education should be, okay, you got to this point is not going to work, but let's unpack your learning process and let's help you learn about your process and where you might want to tinker and that process. And that part of and by the way, Erin, you said this earlier, you take that process of unpacking the learning process and fold that into AI technology, where you can have real-time assessment of your learning process. Boy, the power of that in empowering people is immense.
Yeah, I think
we don't have time to talk about grades today. That might be for another episode, and just getting rid of grades altogether, but we won't go there today.
Yeah. I definitely think it's the technology and adaptive learning is just whoever makes the best adaptive learning tool will be bought out. Like that unicorn of a technology will be absolutely amazing. We're getting there step by step. So Mark, we got one more question for you. We always ask the same question to end our interviews. First, though, I want to thank you for being on the show. I know our listeners appreciate it, so thank you so much.
A lot of fun.
So the last question. So, it's not as good as Erin's present of $1 billion, but I'm going to gift you a Super Bowl commercial. So it's a free,
which cost almost $1 billion.
Yeah, almost.
So
that's right.
Face value is pretty close.
I'm going to gift you one Super Bowl commercial, and you can sell whatever you want. It can't be Maryville, though. So it can't be Maryville. It has to be a passion, a value, something you want to sell that you're going to get the most views, at least in the United States, of anything else. What do you do with your 30-second Super Bowl commercial?
My message would be, again, probably with a professional doing the visuals and everything. My message would be this, that this is a great country, and over the last 250 years, we've only really allowed 25% of the public to really engage in to their full potential in terms of education and opportunity, and that's largely white males, right? For years, women were closed out. For years, people of color were closed out. What could this country be if we unleashed the talent of 100% of this country, African American, Hispanic American, women, et cetera, et cetera? We've been slowly making progress on all of that over the last decades, and civil rights and everything else. But if we fully opened up access to everyone's talents, this country could achieve amazing things, whether it's curing cancer or eliminating poverty and on and on. And I believe that firmly, that the job for us, for anybody who purports to be an educator, is to empower and unleash the most talent we can.
Thanks for listening to Disrupt You. Have a question for the host? Just send that over to Dr. York via Twitter at Prof. D. York, and it could be featured on the show. We'll see you next week for another dive into the future of higher education.